The Prime Minister is on borrowed time and he is in denial. Labour approval rating has sunk to 11%. 70% of voters disapprove of the government. The numbers are even worse than those of my friend Liz Truss. The only times a Prime Minister has reached ratings as bad as this, it has led to their resignation. Rishi Sunak, just weeks into office, sunk to minus 63. Liz reached minus 68 before resigning. Theresa May, in the middle of her own crises, fell to minus 61. These numbers were invariably the mark of Cain for a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's spokesman has spoken, the Prime Minister himself has spoken about turning a corner in 2026 and that ministers should ignore the polls because apparently there's a quote, bad poll numbers don't lead to election losses. That doesn't seem to be a very clever thing for an elected politician to say. But nonetheless, he can frame it as a fight for the political soul of this country. But the numbers reflect a government that is on borrowed time. The tactic of attacking reform and Nigel Farage has failed since it began. Even today, the Prime Minister took less than a minute to attack reform during Prime Minister's questions.
By saying I hope all colleagues had a happy Christmas. It probably feels quite a long time ago now, but not for reform, of course, because today is the day that they celebrate Christmas in Russia.
It's not even a very funny joke, but it's a sign of weakness that you make that sort of jibe at your political opponents. It's not about policy. It's just a cheap crack. Anyway, this has gone beyond a routine dip in popularity, which many prime ministers suffer from and some of them recover from. But when 70% of voters express their disapproval, it's not a wave they can expect to ride out just with time and patience. History shows it tends to get worse, not just for the Prime Minister, but more importantly for the country. Voters won't be paying attention to fine speeches or promises to turn a corner. They'll look at a government that failed to lead at every turn and that has no pith or moment, a government that has lost the trust and confidence of the public. And most importantly, this means Keir Starmer and his ministers end up being incapable of governing. It just drifts. So the Prime Minister can't continue. He is in office, but not in power. And it is the country that suffers.
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their New Year deal. New Year, new VPN. And a huge saving of up to 80% if you act now. You're busy planning how to get in shape, but the hackers are planning how to get into your accounts. ExpressVPN locks down your connection so you can start the year protecting your data. This offer ends on the 7th of January, so scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
As always, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm very pleased now to be joined by the Head of Research at Merlin Strategy, Julian Galley. Julian, thank you for joining me. What do you read into these polls? And if you were advising Keir Starmer on his strategy, how would you advise him to get out of this mess?
Yeah, so if I was reading into these polls, I'd say they're obviously very bad news for the Labour government. And they're actually very similar to what we were seeing in the Theresa May years, the Rishi Sunak years, where for an extended period of time, over several months, even a year or two, the government was on dire approval ratings, whether that's 11% for Keir Starmer with net minus 59 or net 61, net 63 for Rishi Sunak and Theresa May. And the issue with these approval ratings is, to answer your second question, there's very little that the government can do. When a government would have a good week, so for example, Keir Starmer had a fairly good success with America's trade deal when Donald Trump came to visit, you would then be hit with several scandals where any small, minute increases in the polling that you've seen have been totally wiped out and even reversed by something like the Mandelson issue or what happened with Angela Rayner resigning. And that's what Rishi Sunak faced as well. And the way to turn it around is firstly by uniting the party and pushing forward a united front, which is incredibly difficult for Keir Starmer to do at this moment. And secondly, show some progress and delivery on the policies which matter to people, which is cost of living, immigration, and the NHS.
Just one thought on that the thing that changed with Theresa May is that she went and Boris Johnson came in, and the Tories went from their worst election result in the European elections in 2019 to winning with a majority of 80. Does changing the leader offer Labour some hope?
That is what I think a lot of Labour members will be thinking at this moment in time. I think that's what MPs are looking at, and that's why popularity of people like Andy Burnham matters so much to this current Labour government. I think looking at lessons learned from the Conservatives, I think people will also look at who became the darling of the members, such as Robert Jenrick or Boris Johnson, by resigning on principle. And what we could see is more Labour rebellions, more MPs taking a stand against the government, which we already saw on welfare, which we could see on more controversial policies such as immigration, which are not appealing to the left of the party.
And if I offer one further thought, when John Major was coming to the end of his term in office, all the policies that mattered were actually doing quite well. The economy was going well, unemployment was coming down. It was all quite buoyant. But because the government had already become so unpopular, it didn't make an iota of difference. Do you think Keir Starmer has reached that John Major point where whatever he does, it's impossible to get it back?
I think there is a problem at the moment with the messenger that Labour have for their government. We see it in focus groups where people have switched off. People don't believe Keir Starmer is honest. And I think at that point, it's very hard to gain the trust back. What we see in focus groups is people repeatedly mentioning the winter fuel allowance, a policy that's now been reversed. But the principle of going against pensioners, of going against something which wasn't in the manifesto straight away after getting into government, has really stuck with voters. And it's mentioned time and time again in focus groups. And it's really hard to take away that brand image once it's already in the minds of voters.
Well, Julian, thank you very much. I'm now going to go to my panel, Gawain Tola and Kevin Craig. Kevin, I'll give you the chance to go first. It is difficult. Now, personally, I don't think that Keir Starmer is a dishonest man at all, but voters do. How do you overcome that? How would you be advising him to overcome that?
I think the way to counter the current numbers is the parts of what Julian, who just spoke very eloquently, that I would agree with are, it is about good party management, and it is about delivering in the key areas, but also communicating to people better. The fact is, and it's interesting you said about some areas, the John Major government, whether it's falling interest rates, improvements in the NHS, falling net migration, interest in wages, school improvements, fixing the homes of our armed forces, there are a long list of things if government's doing that I could say are delivering on the manifesto. But the numbers in the polls are bad, and here's an exclusive. It's going to get worse this year, right? And the local election results, I think, will be inevitably bad for Labour because it won't be turned around by May. The Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting, those around them, deliver in core areas, keep party discipline, improve living standards, and I believe that things will turn. But people mustn't panic, Jacob.
Do you think the Downing Street operation is working? There was the article in the Sunday Times saying that they get distracted by minor issues that are popular with celebrities and they're not focusing on the big issues. Would you advise the Prime Minister to let his Foreign Secretary do the travelling and stay at home and concentrate on domestic affairs?
Well, I've heard this narrative, but I think foreign policy, I mean, the first priority of this government, as you know, because you've served in cabinets, is to protect its people. So I have no issue with the fact that the Prime Minister's been very involved in foreign policy. I love the fact that we have a strong relationship with the United States of America. I think it bodes well. I feel safe for me and my family that the Prime Minister is who he is currently for this country. But, Jacob, Labour has to do better at discipline in Parliament and delivering on the manifesto, and I believe that things will turn, because I believe that there have been mistakes, but actually you have a government committed to capitalism, better living standards and good public services, and I think that's where the British people are at.
When ministers and prime ministers say we've all got to unite, isn't that the point at which it's a bit late? That isn't unity a consequence of success rather than the harbinger of success?
Well, what a great question, but you've lived this.
Well, that's my point.
Right, you've lived it, and you were very active because you believed with every fibre of your being that you weren't happy with the direction of your party, and that was more important than discipline. What we learnt in the Labour Party, with all its faults, is that the British people do not like chopping and changing. Politicians are put there to serve, They're granted that privilege by people. And Keir was given a 5-year mandate, whether others like it or not. And that's when he should be judged.
That seems to me to be a very good point, that Keir Starmer has a 5-year mandate from the British people.
He does. And here's the thing. Despite the rebellion over the welfare benefit cut in the increase, I don't really see the Labour Party as disunited. I really don't. The only time I hear about disunity in the Labour Party is when Number 10 briefs about disunity in the Labour Party. I don't actually see it. But I do think that the problem is, as Julian was saying, it's gone. It's too late. If you talk to people up and down the country, and I go around the country a lot, people have just given up on this Prime Minister. And you say the country doesn't like chopping and changing, but the move from Theresa May to Boris Johnson was absolutely a change that was approved of and supported. The problem the Labour Party has, it doesn't have a Boris. It doesn't have somebody who grabs the public attention and is perceived to be somebody who can change the world.
Do you mean by that somebody who's going to lock the country down?
No. I mean somebody. I don't mean Boris's policies.
Lie about.
You know full well. I don't mean Boris's policies. I mean his ability to grab the public attention and take things forward, not the policies.
Isn't Angela Rayner the most charismatic figure in the Labour Party?
Which is why I suspect somebody who isn't Keir Starmer had her taken out. Basically, it was not in Keir Starmer's interest to have Angela Rayner knocked out in the way she was. I think it was in the interest of other people who have ambitions.
Where you make a fair point, if I can say, where Gawain makes a fair point, what he's, on the serious matter, what he's alluding to is this perceived question of charisma and showmanship and cut through, right? But the British public, when Labour was granted this large but shallow majority, they'd had enough of turbulence right under the Liz Truss years. And for all the people who say Boris was a great communicator, I would advocate that he wasn't a brilliant administrator and applier of detail. Some people think that Keir is boring and bank manager-like, and that on the telly you don't get the feeling of him in person. I'd agree with that, but I think we need that steady presence.
All right, we're going to have to move on, but thanks to my panel.